So, on today's stream, I'm going to be working on, as the title implies, we're going to be building GitHub-style drag-and-drop image upload out. When I say GitHub-style drag-and-drop image uploads, this is what I'm talking about. So, you can already kind of see the similarities here. We have a title and this description field, and then GitHub similarly has a title and a description. And what it allows you to do is just drag and drop an image from your computer onto the text area, and it'll automatically start uploading, and then once it's done uploading, it will replace that little uploading status with a valid markdown image tag. And I can see that, yeah, that would indeed work. So that is the type of functionality that I'm going to be going after today. So yeah, the first thing that I'm going to need to do is prevent that default behavior. When I drop an image on here, I'm expecting, yo, what's up, Miguel? Yeah, I'm expecting this not to happen. So let's start off by preventing that behavior. Let's see. So this is all taking place in my block form component. So I can open up that file, block form. And I've got this, where are we here? This text area that I want to be able to drop things onto. So let's see. I can give it an onDrop handler. And for now, let's just, well, let's just make a function here. Let's say like event and say event prevent default. Let's see if that does the trick. Okay, cool. So that's preventing the default behavior, and now let's console log this event and see what kind of information we can gather from it. Maybe something about the file that was just dropped on it, perhaps. Okay. So what I'm going to be looking for is this event.dataTransfer property, which indeed I have in this. I just overlooked it completely. So let's console log event data transfer dot items. Let's see what we got. Okay, interesting. Looks like I can loop through the files. Maybe I can access it at index 0. Let's see what happens there. All right, cool. So there's my data transfer item. How do I actually access it? So I can call get as file. That's handy. I can also check if the type is a file. So that's that'll be all right. And I have this information about my data transfer item, what it is, its kind. So I want to only accept files, and I only want to accept images at this time too. So I can also check this type value to make sure that it's an image MIME type. All right. So what I'm going to do is check to make sure that the item exists, that the item's kind is file, and the item type, it matches a regular expression. And we can test regular expressions using regex 101. This is a favorite tool of mine. So I'll have like a few example MIME types that I want to match. Image, JPEG. And so now I can create a regular expression that I think will match these. Like maybe image slash, and then something like that. I think that'll do the trick. So I can grab that regular expression and use this test method to test the item type value. So if it passes that, then we upload it. And in fact, we can call this getAsFile function on the data transfer item. So what I can say is file equals item getAsFile. file. And let's just console log that file now. Okay, so now I have a file. It has a name and a MIME type, and I can see the size of the file. So this is all really good. And now I want to upload it to S3. But before I get into any more of that, I think that this is maybe a good opportunity just to break apart this this functionality out of this main component into its own like special text area component. So what I'm going to do is say, like, I'll call this notes input maybe. And we'll just make a file or a component right here called notes input. And right now, all it does is it renders what we currently have. And what I'm going to do here is just take this file that I was, or this function that I was declaring inline in the onDrop prop, and define it outside of the component, just to make things more tidy. Handle drop. It'll take an event, and everything else is the same. And the last thing I want to do is I can just spread all props that come into this node input, notes input, yeah, into the text area field. And that's specifically default value, I guess. Yeah, let's just use default value for now. And that was props.block.description. And there it is. Okay, and I can still type in it. Great. Earlier in this project, I handled file uploads for these like audio files. So, you know, a user can upload an audio file, and then we upload that to S3. To do this audio file upload, I was using a technique called Amazon S3 signed URLs. So the catch with this particular project is I'm using serverless API. And in the case of the serverless API provider that I'm using, which happens to be Netlify, they have a timeout on all requests to a serverless function. And I think it's something like 10 seconds. But regardless, like whatever the timeout is, what that means is that if if somebody tries uploading a large file, or somebody tries uploading a file on crappy internet, that request might take longer than 10 seconds if I'm using my serverless API to do the upload, causing the request to time out, and then my app doesn't work. So to get around this, what I can do is, and what I have done, is in my GraphQL schema, I've made this, where are we? I've made this create signed URL mutation, where using the S3 API, instead of just uploading the file in my own API, I use this S3 get signed URL method to get like a pre-authenticated URL that I can then upload directly to S3 from my application, thereby like bypassing the 10-second timeout limit that my API will have to suffer through. So then once I get that file directly uploaded to S3, I just get back the location of the file, and then my requests to my API are going to be very small. Like I'm only sending a string, the location of the file, rather than the entire file itself. So when I submit this create project form, I'm trying to get the file input, and then I fire off this mutation to my create signed URL mutation, which just takes a MIME type and a file name, both of which I already have. So I want to do the same kind of create signed URL mutation. So rather than just copying, rather than writing the same mutation out in my block form component, I'm going to take this out of the project form and import it from its eventual home in utils. So now both of these components can use the same mutation, and everybody lives happily ever after. Okay, so that'll do it for project form. And then in the block form, I can go and say, add it to my import here, create signed URL. All right, so notes input, I have my create signed URL mutation. And what I'm going to do is using the use mutation hook from Apollo, I can just pass that create signed URL query document in there and create signed URL. I get this function that I can then call from right here. All right, so let's see. I get, I would normally get this like loading and error states. I don't know if it's going to really work for my purposes here, because what I want to do, similar to what I'm doing in the project form component, is I want to get the data from the I want to await this mutation instead of have it instead of leveraging the hook and grabbing the loading and error states from the hook return value. I want to just do it inline here. I want to block everything until I get data, and then fire off a XML HTTP request to the S3 direct link. And I'm thinking that I can probably reuse some of this code as well. But let's just do this for now. Ooh. So I'm going to destructure data from the return value of create signed URL, and I'll pass it in some variables. It just takes this one input variable, just like this, and I can probably just do something like that. Let's see. What if I just take this and I'll go to my utils function again, and I'm going to create a new function called upload file to S3. And it's just going to return this promise. And maybe what I can do, it's going to need to take this file, like the actual file that I'm uploading, but it'll also need this like create signed URL body to grab the URL and the key that it's eventually going to resolve with. So maybe the signature can look something like this, where I pass in the file as a first argument and then data.createSignedURL as the second. Let's see it like that. Should do the trick for me. And I'm gonna make us a little to-do here that says optionally handle progress events. So the great thing about XML HTTP request, as compared with something like fetch, or even, I don't think Axios supports this either, is progress events. So as your upload is happening, I can get events telling me how much of that file has been uploaded. So I can have like a loading indicator, some like bar that grows as the file gets uploaded for me. And make sure to export this. And now I can go and replace it in my project form, first of all. Go and upload file. And replace this await new promise stuff with, instead, await my upload file function. And I'm going to pass in, like I was saying, my first argument is the file, and the second argument is data.createSignedURL. Now I can get rid of all that. Beautiful. Cool. Now we can do the same thing over in the block form. I'll say const key equals await upload file. Come on, VS Code, auto import it for me. There we go. With file and data.create signed URL as my 2 arguments. And then finally, I'm going to console log that key. Now, while all this is happening, I want to disable the field, or this like text field, so that nothing else can kind of like happen to screw up the text that I'm going to be manipulating in here. So what I'm going to do is, before any of this async stuff happens, we can just say set loading to true, and then after all of this stuff is finished, set loading back to false. And set loading is undefined, hence the red squiggly. So why don't we go up here and define it? We'll say loading, and set loading is going to be the return value of use state from React, and the default value is going to be false. And then while we're loading, we can just disable the text field. So we'll say is disabled is equal to that loading state that we just defined. All right, so now I'm going to be paying attention to my console, and hopefully we get a key back depicting the location of the file that I just uploaded. So we drag it over, and there it is. There's my my new file. So if we go to, what would the URL be? I don't know off the top of my head, but that's okay. I can find out. It would be like this. Maybe maybe this can be the return value for the key. But there's my uploaded file. So the upload worked. That's really good. Now we have to do this kind of complicated part about actually adding the loading indicator to the text field. And I just want to make sure that this actually disabled, and it does. It does. You can see it kind of flash gray there. Perfect. So to do this, the first thing I'm going to want to do is change this text area from an uncontrolled input, which is what it currently is. It doesn't. I'm not handling an on-change state or passing in a specific value here. I'm relying on this default value prop. So what that means is that it sets the original state of the input, but then all of the key presses from then on are not being handled by JavaScript or anything like that. They're just I'm taking advantage of the default input behavior in the browser. So what I'm going to want to do instead is say we'll give this a value prop. Value prop. That's like a business thing, isn't it? And or maybe you know what, we can keep this default value. Yeah, I'm gonna keep the prop called default value, and instead of just spreading it onto the text area, what I'll do is define notes input dot prop types a default value, which is going to be a string, and it's going to be required. And we're going to use this as the default state for some local value state that I can define in here. So props.default value, and this is going to be called, the state's going to be called value, and the setter will be set value. Shocker, right? And then we can link it up to this text area like so. Give the value prop. my value state variable. And then on change, we'll create a handle change function. I almost feel like this having a separate function is overkill in this case. Like I could just say event, make a function that takes an event argument and calls set value with the event target value. And everything works as it did before, except now the big difference is within my handle drop function, I can actually affect the value of the input directly, whereas before I couldn't because there was no way for me to mutate that value outside of actually typing in the text field. So let's see. So when I start my upload, I say set loading to true, and just to test this out, let's say set value to, like, we'll take the previous value and just say pre value plus, maybe we'll add a couple new lines, and write in the same style as GitHub does. Remember, we're using GitHub as our inspiration here. Let's see what happens if my cursor's on this line. That's the extent of my content, and I upload a new file. It just breaks it onto the next line, and then it does this kind of thing, like exclamation mark uploading file name ... And what do they put in this? I have to read that again. Nothing. Okay, cool. So it's like uploading file name ... and then empty parentheses. And that didn't work, apparently. Okay, well, we're gonna make it work. Let's try this one more time just to see. Come on, GitHub, you can do it. There we go. And then it subs in the file name without the extension, and then the real location of that image. And in their case, they're just using, it looks like this is like a big UUID, which I could probably do something similar myself. All right, so what I want to do is in here say, what was it? Uploading, and then file.name. And if I look back in my console, I can actually see what one of these files looks like. So yeah, the name property is the full name with the extension. And I have to do this after I call get item as file, or item.get as file rather. So let's do that. Uploading file.name with an ellipsis and then empty parentheses. I'm just going to do one line break. Let's see how that works. Oh, and here's what I wanted to know as well. If I already have some content in here and I have my cursor positioned at this line, when I upload a new file, yeah, it appears right below in the line right after where my cursor is. What if I'm in the middle of this existing bit of text? It just puts it wherever my cursor is, or it creates a line break, adds the thing, and then adds another line break afterwards. But it's all dependent on your cursor position. So that's another thing that I'm going to have to account for eventually. But let's just see if this works. So I grab my image, drop it in, and uploading images.jpg. And of course, when I get my data back, I don't replace it yet, but this is great. This gives me the desired loading state. Yeah, what we're going to do here is we want to replace this string with the full string to the location of our file. So to do that, what we can do is just an easy way to do this maybe would be to take this little uploading string, make a variable called placeholder. And I can just continue using it as I was, like this. And then after I get the file uploaded, we can say set value and take the previous value and just say prev value replace placeholder with let's see, we want it to just say, well, first of all, location of our file, which will be key. And then in here, we just want the file name without the extension. We were kind of doing this before in the create signed URL resolver in my schema. We're just saying input name, split on a period, and then remove the last item in the array, and then join them back together with period. So if there's like multiple dots in the file name, it accounts for that as well. So I just copied that to my clipboard. Now I can go back here and do the same thing in here. Like, let's say file name, and do all this. So we'll put file name in there and the key. This should all do the trick. Let's see what happens. So I go upload this, and there's my Apollo Indigo file name and the full URL to the file. And if I save, there it is. We got the file upload to actually show up in there. So that's a huge milestone. Really excited to see. So now I've got this is kind of working as expected. I just need to adjust where I'm actually inserting my placeholder. So to do this, I'm going to look at Google. I'm going to type like find cursor position in text area. Well, I know that there's this selection start attribute that these input elements have, and this handle drop event is taking place on my text area. So here's a little bit of exploration that we can do. I'm just going to console log event target. I'm expecting this to be my text area. Let's see what we get. So I drop an image actually, and for right now, I'm going to just return here. I don't need to be going through like the upload process just yet. I just want to try to get a handle on this cursor position issue. So I do this, and of course, event target is my text area. So what if I say event target selection start? What do I get then? Okay. I'm also just going to comment out set loading so that my input is never disabled. Okay, so that's 0. That one's 89. If I move up to if I put my cursor at after the first letter, I'm expecting selection start to be 1. And indeed it is. Awesome. Okay, so now the question is, how do I insert, even if I know the index at where my cursor is in the text area, how do I actually insert some text at that index? Let's check it out. So right now I'm just appending my placeholder at the end of the previous value, but maybe what I want to do instead is say like previous value slice from the 0 index to the selection start, and then add my placeholder, and then put the rest of the previous value in at the end. So previous value event target selection start. And to do all this, I'm actually going to I'm just going to destructure selection start from the event target so that I can use less characters here. So before I even do this, I want to test something. So let's say I have some text. I'm going to blow up my console so that you guys can see. I love using the Chrome console just to like test random JavaScript ideas that I have. So let's say I have some text, foo bar baz, and I say text slice 0, and let's pick a number 3. Oh, maybe like 4. So foo and then a space. Okay, and then text slice 4 is just bar and baz. So that will work. What I was wondering is if I had to like increment this or decrement it or anything like that, but I think that this strategy will work as is. So that's good to know. And if I want, like, I'm just looking at all these pluses and I'm thinking maybe this is like, does that look ugly? Kind of, huh? Here's another option. Instead of writing these new lines, like being repetitive like that, we can say, and this might look too obscure actually, but curious to hear what you guys think of this. So I just put all 3 of these things in an array, and then I'd say join using a new line. How do we feel about that? Does that look too magical? I kind of like it. Guys, this is what we're going to do. We're going to slice the previous value from its start to the current cursor position, insert the placeholder, and then put the rest of the previous value on the end, and then join them all together with new lines so that placeholder gets separated onto its own line. So now if I try adding, cool, I still have my set loading to true there. If I try uploading a file here, it works as I would expect it to. And there it is. There's our image. That looks pretty good, honestly. What about a big image? Let's try this. Where's a big image that I have? Let's try this. Is that big? Yeah, it's kind of big. But it already resizes automatically. That's incredible. Why is it even doing that? Ah, this is awesome. So I'm taking advantage of, I'm using Chakra UI in this app. And I guess Chakra UI just automatically adds this max width 100% and height auto to images, like all images on the page. That's pretty nice. Okay, so that should do it for image uploads. Maybe what I'll do is do this handle headings in my Markdown content, and I'll show you how I'm parsing this Markdown content into React components right now. But before I do that, I'm going to make a commit and just say I'm going to say wire up GitHub-like image uploads.